can't see how.
10 things went wrong when David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks came back to the Temptations.
You're on the top. There's no place you can really go but down.
You know the voices, My Girl, Just My Imagination. In 1982, Motown put them back on stage, the classic lineup reassembled.
And a shaking, refuse my conversation in any situation.
It should have been the greatest comeback in soul music. Instead, it barely lasted the year.
Last week my life had meaning.
Number 10, the manager who wanted them gone before they even started.
It's cold and the new day seems old.
Here's what most fans never knew. Willie Berger managed the group, and Berger made it clear, on the record, that he wasn't interested in sticking around if Ruffin and Kendricks were staying. Not later, not after some rough patch 3 months in. From close to the beginning, you've got two of the most beloved voices in soul music walking back through the door after a decade away, fans losing their minds at the news, and the person in charge of the whole operation is already counting down the days until they leave again. Not a small thing. That's not backstage gossip somebody made up years later. Berger wasn't shy about it, and he didn't just have a problem with David's chaos. He said Eddie's voice was shot too, flat out, no softening it, no diplomacy. That's a manager talking about two men who were, at that exact moment, the biggest reason tickets were selling. Berger wasn't some outsider gossiping from a distance. This was the man negotiating their contracts, handling their money, standing in every room where the real decisions got made. Says he's out if they stay. That's not an opinion. That's a threat with actual power behind it. Berger wasn't wrong about everything either. He'd been around long enough to see patterns other people wanted to ignore. But here's the thing. Managing the money doesn't believe in the reunion. That tells you something about what was really happening behind the curtain, underneath all those sold-out marquees and all that applause. This wasn't a case of things quietly falling apart over months. Somebody in the room saw it coming from the jump and said so, out loud, before the tour bus even left the lot. Number 9, every night was a gamble. By 1982, David Ruffin wasn't just going through a rough patch. He was, by this point, a full-blown cocaine addict. And that meant something specific for a touring show. It meant nobody, not Otis, not the band, not the promoters who'd sold out the room, actually knew if David was going to make it on stage that night. Not really. Not until the lights came up and he either walked out or he didn't. He missed shows, multiple ones, across multiple cities, and every single time he didn't show, the group got hit with a fine. Real money gone for a seat that had already been paid for by a fan who drove hours, maybe, to hear My Whole World Ended live for the first time in over a decade. If you've ever waited on someone you love to show up, checking the door, checking the time, making excuses for them before they'd even walked in, telling yourself this time would be different, you know that specific kind of exhaustion. Now imagine doing that with your career, with your paycheck, with 5 other men's paychecks riding on it too, every single night, city after city. And here's what gets me about this part. Ruffin wasn't some hired gun who could just be swapped out quietly if he didn't show. He was David Ruffin, the voice everybody paid to hear. So every missed show wasn't just a scheduling problem for a tour manager to sort out. It was the whole reason people bought the ticket, standing them up. It's a hard thing to sit with, especially when you love the music this much and you want to believe the story ends better than this. Here's the part that's easy to miss too. This wasn't new information to anybody close to the group. David's struggles hadn't started in 1982. They just followed him back through the door when Motown brought him home. Nobody was blindsided. They just hoped, maybe, that the stage lights and the crowd noise would be enough to hold him steady. By the time the tour was rolling, this wasn't a rumor anymore. It was the daily math the whole operation had to do before every single show. Will he show up tonight? And if he doesn't, what does that cost us? In money and in something harder to put a number on.
Let me tell you about mine.
Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's one coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 8. The voice that built the sound couldn't do it anymore.
And gone away with her,
Now let's talk about Eddie, because this one's quieter than David's story, but it hurts just as much, maybe more, once you sit with it. Eddie Kendricks had one of the most recognizable falsettos in American music. That high, floating tone on Just My Imagination, that's Eddie. That's a voice that made grown men weak in the knees and made Get Ready feel like it was lifting off the ground. But years of heavy smoking had done real damage to his vocal cords. And by 1982, hitting those signature high notes, night after night, city after city, on a 9-month tour, just wasn't there the way it used to be.
Please go away. A girl has found
Nobody's blaming him for it. That's not what this is. This isn't a story about somebody not trying hard enough.
wish it would rain.
But you know that feeling when you go back to something you used to be great at, and your body just doesn't cooperate the way it did anymore? Maybe it's a sport you played young. Maybe it's an instrument you put down for 10 years and picked back up, expecting your hands to remember.
Let it rain. Let it rain.
The mind remembers exactly what to do. The body has other plans entirely. Now imagine that happening in front of thousands of people who paid specifically, deliberately, to hear you do the one thing you built your whole name on, and you can feel it slipping in real time, under the lights, with nowhere to hide. Berger's comment that Eddie's voice was shot probably went too far. It wasn't gone, it wasn't nothing, but it was weakened, and weakened in the exact register that made him Eddie Kendricks in the first place, not some other part of his range where nobody would have noticed.
And gone away with her
That's the cruelest kind of decline, losing the very thing people came to hear. And that's a different kind of heartbreak than David's story. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't addiction pulling him off the stage entirely. This was just time, quietly catching up with him, on the biggest stage he'd stood on in over a decade, in front of the people who'd been waiting the longest to hear him. Some of y'all know exactly what that feels like. Watching a gift you built your whole identity around start to slip, a little more every year, and having to decide whether to keep showing up anyway. Number 7. 7 Men, 1 Spotlight. Okay, here's the part I think people underestimate the most. This wasn't a five-man group anymore. This was seven. Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, Dennis Edwards, Glenn Leonard, Richard Street, and now, back in the fold, David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks. Seven grown men, seven distinct voices, all needing lead time on one stage, in one show, on one night, in front of fans who each showed up wanting to hear their favorite voice front and center. And I'll say something that might get some of you going in the comments. I think the reunion diluted itself. Not because any one of those men lacked talent. That lineup was loaded, genuinely stacked, probably the most vocal firepower this group ever had on stage at one time, but because there's only so much spotlight to go around, and math doesn't care how much history or talent you're working with. Dennis Edwards had been the lead voice holding this group down for years by this point. He'd earned that position, night after night, tour after tour, while David was out there struggling on his own. Now he's sharing that same real estate with the very men whose shoes he'd been filling since 1968. If you've ever been part of a team that suddenly got a talented new addition and you found yourself wondering where you fit in anymore, even though nobody said a single word about it out loud, even though everybody smiled for the cameras, you know that particular tension. Nobody has to say it for everybody in the room to feel it. Here's the thing about live shows too. Somebody has to decide who sings lead on which song every single night. Who gets Ain't Too Proud? Who gets Just My Imagination? That's not a small decision when you've got seven men who each have a claim to a piece of this catalog, and egos built by real stardom, real hits, real history nobody can just erase for the sake of a smoother show. Seven Temptations sounds like abundance. On paper, it's a dream lineup, the kind fans fantasize about for years. But somebody's mic time gets shorter every time you add another lead voice to the show, and somebody's ego takes a hit they might never say out loud. I'd argue this is the most underrated reason the whole thing strained at the seams. Not the addiction, not the voice, just too many stars, not enough stage to hold them all comfortably. Number 6, the reunion was bleeding money.
You know what, baby? You got style like I have never seen.
Let's bring it back to the business side for a second, because this is where it gets real. For anybody who's ever run something, a business, a band, a family budget, stretched thinner than it should be.
Got my paycheck and I nearly cried.
Every time David missed a show, the fine came out of the group's pocket. Not out of David's pocket alone, out of the whole operations pocket, the same pot that paid the band, the crew, the buses rolling from city to city.
Pay your bills, pay your gas. You gotta pay your tax, pay your phone.
So even on nights when the tickets sold out completely, the show could still lose money by the time the math got done. Think about that. A sold-out room, every seat filled, every ticket paid for weeks in advance. Fans lined up around the block to hear Ain't Too Proud to Beg, live from the original voices. Some of them saving up for months just to be in that room. And behind the curtain, the accountants are doing damage control because the very reason those seats sold might not even show up that night. And here's the thing about touring. Something people who've never done it don't always understand from the outside.
How much I love you, it takes money, yeah.
The lights don't turn off because the room's empty or the headliner's a no-show. The band still gets paid. The crew still gets paid. The bus still runs, city to city, whether or not David Ruffin walks out on time or at all.
Why can't you just be satisfied with my love?
So this wasn't just an emotional strain on the group. It was a financial one, and those two things feed each other in a way that makes everything worse.
Takes a little bit of money, yeah.
Money problems make everybody's nerves shorter. Shorter nerves make the addiction harder to manage with any patience left in the tank. And harder patience makes the whole machine even more fragile than it already was walking in.
Got none, yeah, you know.
If you've ever watched a project you believed in start losing money for reasons completely outside your control, you know how quickly that drains the will to keep going, even when the crowds are still showing up and cheering like nothing's wrong.
You better pay it back, pay your bills, pay your gas.
By the time anybody added it all up, successful tour and profitable tour had quietly become two very different sentences. And nobody wanted to be the one who said that part out loud first.
Pay your phone, pay your loan. You better pay it back, pay your bills.
Number 5, the job David lost never really belonged to someone else. Here's a fact that changes how you hear this whole reunion once you actually sit with it. When David Ruffin got fired from the Temptations back in 1968, for being, by most accounts, increasingly difficult and unpredictable, harder and harder to manage, the man who replaced him was Dennis Edwards. So in 1982, David didn't just walk back into a group. He walked back into a room with the exact man who'd been standing in his old spot for over a decade. The man who'd carried the lead vocal torch through the 70s, who'd built his own legacy, his own fans, his own sound on songs David never got to sing because David wasn't there anymore. If you've ever gone back to a place you used to work and found someone else thriving in your old role, doing your old job well, maybe even better than expected, respected by the same people who once knew you, you know that particular strange discomfort. It's not that you wish them failure. Most of the time you don't. It's that your absence built somebody else's success, brick by brick, and now you're standing right next to it, expected to smile for the cameras. And that's a wound reunions don't fix. You can put David back on the stage, you can give him his old songs back for a night, but you can't put the last 14 years back the way they were, and you can't undo what those 14 years built for somebody else in your place. Here's the part that makes it messier. Dennis wasn't some placeholder who quietly stepped aside once David came back. He was still a lead voice on this exact tour, still singing lead on Papa Was a Rollin' Stone most nights, still very much the man holding down the middle of that stage. So this wasn't old history being politely acknowledged. This was old history, standing shoulder to shoulder, singing harmony together, every single night. If you were around in Detroit in the early 80s, following this group closely, watching them up close, you probably remember sensing that tension, even if nobody ever said it out loud on stage. Some things you just feel in a room. Number 4, Eddie was pushed out for asking a question. Motown didn't want to answer.
Until you are mine, beware.
Here's Here's one most casual fans never connect, and it's worth slowing down on.
There's no substitution. No, I won't let.
Before he left the group in 1970, Eddie Kendricks had been pressing Motown, alongside David actually, back when they still stood together on the same side of this fight, to open up the books, to actually show the group what they were earning, where the money from all those hit records was really going. Berry Gordy's answer, more or less, was no. Motown ran a tight ship, and that kind of transparency wasn't how the label operated, no matter how many charts you'd topped for them.
Check your ground, baby. It might be
And not long after Eddie kept pushing on it, he was out of the group entirely. So when Eddie walked back on stage in 1982, he wasn't just rejoining old bandmates he'd missed.
I just won't be denied.
He was standing back in business with the very label that pushed him out for asking a fair question about his own money, his own royalties, his own worth.
Conversation won't even look my way.
And if you've ever gone back to work for someone who wronged you because the paycheck was too good to turn down this time, because the opportunity mattered more in the moment than the old grudge you'd been carrying, you know exactly how complicated that decision feels from the inside.
But girl, I'm gonna get you.
It's not forgiveness. Let's be honest about that. It's math. It's looking at what you can gain now against what you lost back then, and deciding the trade is worth it anyway.
Oh, you better beware.
Maybe you've made that exact call in your own life, swallowing something for a bigger opportunity. That's not a footnote in this story. That's the emotional floor this whole reunion was standing on.
Listen, honey, every time I see
Old resentment, quietly present, dressed up in a nice suit and a spotlight, every single night, underneath the harmonies that sounded so effortless from the audience. And here's what's wild about it. Nobody in that crowd cheering for Just My Imagination had any idea they were watching a man share a stage with the label that once told him his own earnings weren't his business to ask about. Number 3. Otis never actually believed in forever. Here's something that might sting a little, especially if you were one of the fans who bought into this reunion with your whole heart.
I've been to Georgia and California.
From what's come out since, Otis Williams, the man holding this whole group together, the last living original member, the one steering every major decision, never really treated this reunion like a permanent thing. Not from the start.
Part of an old man's heart, just a once before.
It was framed to fans and to the press as a comeback, a homecoming. Magazine covers, radio interviews, the whole nostalgic rollout designed to make you believe the classic Temptations were truly back for good this time.
For someone they couldn't find.
But from the inside, from what the people closest to it have said in the years since, it reads more like a calculated experiment with a built-in expiration date, quietly ticking down from day one. And look, I understand why.
Moment of your time.
I'm not here to make Otis the villain of this story. He had watched David's addiction and Eddie's decline up close, night after night, long before the tour ever started.
But I've never been to me.
He knew the risk he was taking before the first ticket ever sold, before the first sold-out crowd screamed his name back at him. So maybe protecting himself and the group's actual future meant never fully committing his heart to something he suspected wouldn't last.
I've been to paradise, but I've never.
But there's something a little painful about realizing the reunion you were falling in love with as a fan was never actually meant to last in the mind of the man running it. You were watching a homecoming. He might have been watching a countdown. If you've ever been part of something that felt permanent to you, a relationship, a friendship, a job you thought would be your last one, only to find out later the other side saw it as temporary from the very beginning, you know that specific sting. It's not betrayal exactly. Nobody lied to your face. It's just a gap. A gap between how much you believed in something and how much the people steering it ever actually did.
Don't walk away, 'cause I have this need to
I'll say this, and some of you are going to disagree with me hard in the comments. I think Otis made the right business call, given everything he was watching up close.
but I've never.
I just don't think it's the story most fans ever wanted to hear about the men they'd waited a decade to see back together.
I can see so much of me
Number 2, success wasn't enough to save it.
touching their hearts with this song.
Here's the part that should make this whole story even more painful, once it sinks in.
Feels its own, yeah. Backstage.
This reunion actually worked, commercially. It wasn't a flop nobody wanted. The reunion album climbed into the top 10 on the R&B chart and stayed there for weeks. The tour sold out night after night. 900 fans packed into the Premier Center in Detroit alone on opening night, screaming for a lineup they never thought they'd see standing together again. 9 months on the road, sellout crowds coast to coast, city after city, month after month. By almost every external measure anybody could point to, this was a hit. A real one. The kind most groups spend their whole careers chasing, and it still ended. That's the part that gets me, honestly, every time I think about it. We tell ourselves, if it's working, if the crowds are showing up, if the money's coming in the front door, that's supposed to be the thing that saves it. That's supposed to be proof it's worth fighting to keep alive. But it wasn't enough here, because underneath the box office numbers, underneath every standing ovation, the group was still dealing with missed shows, a strained voice, a crowded stage, and old wounds nobody had actually closed, no matter how good the applause sounded from out front. You know what's worse than failing quietly, out of the spotlight where nobody's watching? Succeeding loudly while it's falling apart behind the curtain, in front of everyone, and having to smile through it anyway. The applause doesn't stop the bleeding backstage. It just makes the ending harder to see coming until it's already standing right in front of you, and by then it's too late to fix.
But just because he's him.
If you've ever watched something look absolutely perfect from the outside, a relationship, a family, a friendship, while you knew exactly how shaky it really was underneath, you already understand this one in your bones. Everybody else sees the highlight reel. You're the one who knows what it actually costs to keep smiling through it. Sometimes the numbers can be great, and the story can still be over. Those two things aren't as connected as we want to believe. Number 1, the phone call that ended it for good. And here's how it actually ended. Not with a blow-up, not with a headline splashed across a magazine, not even with a big dramatic final show where everybody knew it was goodbye. It ended with a phone call. By the end of 1982, Otis had made his decision. And the way it's been told, he called Eddie Kendricks personally to deliver the news. The reunion was over. Ruffin and Kendricks were out, for good this time, and the group would go back to 5. Back to the lineup Otis had decided he could actually manage, actually trust, actually build a future on. Think about that for a second.
Sweet, my life had meaning. It was beautiful and
10 months earlier, these men were standing on a stage in Detroit, in front of 900 fans, losing their minds, singing Old Man River together. For the first time in over a decade, tears in the audience, grown men and women who'd waited years for exactly this moment.
so sweet. But now it's
And it ends with a phone call, sometime around the holidays, one old friend telling another the door was closing. No stage, no crowd, just a voice on the other end of the line delivering the news. And here's what makes this one hurt more than every single thing on this list combined.
just don't wanna waste tomorrow, honey. You're not sharing.
This wasn't just the end of a tour, or the end of an album cycle, or a business decision that could be revisited down the road. This was, in real terms, the last real chance the classic lineup ever had.
Oh, baby, down my road.
David Ruffin passed away in 1991. Eddie Kendricks passed away in 1992. Whatever door closed with that phone call in 1982, it never opened again. Not really. Not permanently. Not in the way fans kept hoping it might for years afterward.
My whole world ended the moment you left me.
Some of y'all already know this. Story hurts different once you know how it ends for both of them. That's not me being dramatic for effect. That's just what happened, plain and simple.
The moment you left me, it's coming down to the ground, baby.
And if you've ever had a relationship end quietly, not with a fight, not with a scene, just a conversation that closed something for good without either side fully realizing it was the last time, you know exactly how this one feels.
Nothing without you, baby. My whole world is incomplete.
You don't always get the dramatic ending. Sometimes you just get a phone call, and then years of wondering what could have been.